Cool. So we are now recording. Rich,
Yes.
how are you?
All right. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Would you like to introduce yourself really quick for the audience?
Yeah, sure. I'm Rich Shao. I live in Bernathen, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia, and I have a landscaping company where we specialize in garden installation. My wife and I. I'm 45. We've been married about 12 years, and I think it's 12. I might pass that up. But yeah, and I do stone engraving and headstones. So have this sort of a double business there. But yeah, and that's about it. I have a lot of years experience doing landscaping and about a decade of experience doing stone engraving.
So, really quick, two things that grabbed my interest. Well, actually, one big thing that grabbed my interest about you is that you actually studied trees and
Yeah.
plants.
Yep. I have
Or
a degree in ornamental horticulture from Williamson Trade School. Williamson Trade School is a free trade school right outside of Philadelphia in Media, PA, and what a good reputation. And their horticulture program, which is the study of trees. I'm actually on plants. I'm on the horticulture advisory committee for the school. And one of the biggest things they ran into is that the kids that are coming to young men that are coming to school there at the trade school don't even know what horticulture is. So because it's maybe a big word to describe just all it means is the study of plants. But yeah, so I had
I'm guilty of that. If somebody told me, "Hey, what is horticulture?" I would have been like,
right.
"Huh."
Yep. Yeah, it just means gardens. Hortus. It's a Latin word. So the idea is so they actually changed it to landscape construction. They changed the name of the trade to get so people knew what they were getting into.
It's easier for the millennials.
That's exactly it. Yeah, apparently I'm a Gen Xer, and I guess we got Latin training back in the day. But I went there for 3 years, studied. I've always been into outdoors and specifically trees and plants. But like listening to the last podcast with Josh, he was mentioning the wood. We shared a shop right next to each other. I'm actually in my shop right now. Otherwise, my wife would be trying to be quiet in the background. But my shop is right next to my house. Yeah, so I've studied trees, and one of the things I've done over the years, because in the landscaping industry, you get come across tons of wood, whether it's cutting trees down, and so being able to harvest that and mill my own wood, whether it's I hired guys to do it with a portable bandsaw mill, is really cool to watch. They come by with a trailer, and they got this huge grappling hook things that are hydraulic that pull the log up, and there's a big bandsaw that they run through the log. And so I either hire someone to do that. It's a hobby of mine. Woodworking's a hobby. So and I just cut some trees open, or I do it with a chainsaw, and I stash the wood in my shop. And I love all different types of wood. My favorite is cherry, walnut, and also harder woods like black locust, which is a fascinating tree. It actually, I always say it's we'd be under British rule right now if it weren't for the black locust tree. So,
and why is that?
Way back in the day, which was a Wednesday. I stole that joke from Dane Cook. But yeah, the black locust tree is really hard, and there was our Navy during the War of 1812 the British ships were coming down Lake Champlain in Vermont, and the pins that held the planks of the wooden battleships were the British were made out of oak, but the Americas were made out of black locust. So when a cannonball hit the hit the side of the ship, the oak pins would blow out, and then the planks would fall off the ship. And so they say, because if they got down Lake Champlain, they go down, they could have got into New York, and then it would have been the end of it. They stopped the British Navy in that lake because our ships the planks didn't blow out. That they would just absorb the shock because the pins, that the dowels that held the ship together, didn't give out like they did in the British. So the black locust tree won the war.
Is that the most patriotic tree in the country then?
I think it is, man. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's my favorite, and it did a better job than their oak pins did. So
interesting. So did they know this at the time, or was it just one of those?
So what's interesting, I don't know. That's a good question. I think they did, because anybody that works with the trees, remember, we're in Pennsylvania, or they used to say that there's a squirrel could jump, never touch the ground, go from Maine to Florida. There were so many trees here in the States when they first came over. Someone wrote that, like probably from Jamestown, or
Right.
just basically explaining how many trees there were. So, and black locust being a native tree, were everywhere, and they kind of grow in groves. They sort of tend to grow in groves. You'll see like a bunch of them in one spot. And so I think they did, because if you ever try to work this, man, I mean, I built a garden, raised vegetable garden with some black oak or black locust planks that I got milled up. And I tried to use a staple gun and staple some chicken wire on it. It bounced. It laughed at me. It just bounced straight off. So it didn't even penetrate the wood. It was so hard. So anybody that worked black locust, I mean, and by that point, in the early 1800s, they had plenty of experience. So that, yeah, I'm pretty sure they knew that.
So just through experience of trying to work with it, they knew it was an extra tough wood.
Yep. In fact, there's the one thing, I worked at the Bernathen Cathedral, which is my hometown. There's an old Gothic cathedral they built in around 1913. They broke ground on it, and it's built after the cathedrals of Europe. They imported a lot of artisans and masons and carpenters from Europe to build it, and they used black locust pins to hold the roof beams. They have big beams of white oak, and they used black locust pins to hold it together. So they knew about it. Yeah.
So they knew through experience about the black locust being extra tough. So that kind of leads to my question of why study trees, right? It seems kind of like I don't know. Again, this is almost from a millennial standpoint, right? Trees, they make oxygen, they absorb heat, they clean the air, they give animals a home. And when you chop them down and you pull the roots, right? Like that's trees 101. What made you want to say, I'm going to study this even deeper? And what is the benefit of it?
Yeah, well, the trees, I'm actually looking at a coin right now, and it has a tree on it. It's near my altar I set up here in my shop, and it's represents the tree of life, this one coin. And so it has spiritual connotations too. Like a tree can represent a person, and a forest can represent a community of people. And so into the diversity of tree species there are, the same with people. I mean, there's black people, there's white people. It's different, we quote unquote species, but like, groupings of people that have different traits, and they all have qualities. Trees do, I'm talking about, have qualities that are really unique. For instance, I'm going to get biblical on you for a sec here. Okay. Because you asked why, and to understand the love of understanding trees really goes back to my childhood and learning from the Bible about what the different trees represent. Like the first temple that was built by King Solomon. He built it with cedar of Lebanon, and cedar of Lebanon is like a pine basically. It's a softwood, but it smells really good. But it also the qualities that it have is the oils in the tree make it so it's rot resistant. So not only does it have a nice fragrance, the wood itself, but the oils in it make it so that insects and fungus won't eat it and break it down. So every tree has qualities, and that we all, and plants in general. I mean, they're all the pharmaceuticals. They're out there in the woods. They're the plants. They always have been, and all they do now is synthesize what's usually a natural structure, molecular structure, like things like digitalis, for instance, is a flower. It's a foxglove, beautiful flower. It's used in gardens, and it's used if someone has a heart attack, they take digitalis. Now they synthesize it, they make it regular, and because the pharmaceutical companies want their cut, they're not going to want to have someone just have digitalis pills that they or a tea that they can make themselves. So they're going to make it that you can only buy it in a pill, or the FDA does not won't approve natural remedies. That's a whole nother topic. But the trees are healing. The plants are healing. Trees, and specifically the wood of the trees, have different uses. I mentioned black locust. I mean, every tree has a different use, and the wood of that tree has a different use. So understanding what it is, I mean, look for tulip poplar, for instance. So what it's a very lightweight wood, and it also absorbs water. It's a very lightweight wood, and it also absorbs water. Well, what could you use tulip poplar for? How about fruit containers to ship fruit? Like you're not going to have. It's not going to be something that is a lot of weight that would be expensive to ship, and but it also absorbs water. So if you have some peaches that smush at the bottom, and it'll absorb that moisture and not get fungus and rot and everything. So every wood that's the beauty of wood, is it has every type of wood has a use, and it's understanding that use, and they're here for us to use and exploit. And exploit, I mean use them. I don't mean to take advantage of them.
Right.
In fact, like to be proper stewards of our land, which I believe we are more than the mainstream media tells us we are. If you go across the plains, more trees have been planted by people than taken down. That's not true in the beginning when the settlers first came here, but you go out west where there's normally grasslands. It's like there are full neighborhoods and cities built with plenty of trees that used to not be there. So, where people go, trees go too. People plant trees. So consider that people don't often consider that as something. It's usually man, the narrative. It's hard for my wife and I to even watch some of these PBS shows. We love nature shows, but it's always man is bad and man is evil. And look what they've done. They're polluting everything, the environment. We're all going to die. That's usually the message you get, but it's not true. And a lot of this stuff might be true. I just don't buy it. I don't know if it is these days. It's hard to find out what data points do you want to listen to, because there's any variety of information is available to you, and you can argue any point with quote unquote data that may or may not be true. So it's kind of frustrating that way. But, for the most part, I think nature, mankind are usually good stewards of the environment. Something that I don't think people really consider that much.
Yeah, and that's interesting because so that was going to be one of the follow-up questions is, with trees and plants providing so much to humanity and to our way of life, how do you feel about, the environmental impacts of us, and again, maybe here in the United States, it's very obvious that maybe we are planting a lot of trees. If I remember right, during the last 4 years under the Trump administration, I think we planted more trees than any other,
Mhm.
you know, 4 years of a presidency ever.
Yeah.
Now, does that naturally solve all of our problems? Probably not, but it's a step in the right direction, right?
Right. Yeah. It's I think once the things get once the environment gets politicized, it then like I said, it's hard to find what's true. You just saw a pollution map today. I was just scrolling through, and someone posted a little TikTok video of pollution in green being good and purple being really polluted, and they showed across the whole world, sort of like this. It's like radar kind of looks like. And the United States was one of the least polluted areas in the world. It was India and China and Poland were like the worst, in parts of Africa. But it was like, it's really interesting to see that, because it's like, there's that's not the message that we are told in the media.
Yeah, and it also goes back to, do we want to be a leader or a follower, right? So
Right.
I think while I don't agree with all of the initiatives that are out there, I do believe that taking care of at least our shores is a priority, right?
Amen.
Um,
Yep. Couldn't agree
if
more.
Yeah, and so it's always funny to hear, well, if we protect the environment, we'll lose jobs, but I think we can also create jobs, right?
That's absolutely right, and that's the goal of the millennial generation. I think is it's easy to bust on the millennials, but I'll tell you, it's like that's the kind of solutions that your generation makes. That's what we're seeing coming, new ideas about how to do that, and that's what's hopeful about looking forward is just that is there's new ideas. Of course it can create jobs. It's coming from the paradigm, whether you come from a lack or abundance, and jobs can be with each new piece of understanding, whether it be data and true data. You can take action on that and create new ways of being. That, like, one of the things my wife studied and she actually got certified is in permaculture. Are you familiar with that?
I am not.
Okay, that you want to blow your mind? Look that up. Like permaculture, PERMA, permaculture. It's almost hard to describe. It's a comprehensive way of living that gives back more than is taken away. And I'm doing a poor job of explaining it, but think about, like, here's an example. If you were to grow your own food, go homesteading, buy a plot of land and go homesteading, you take in consideration the elevation, the rainfall, and this is a lot of the practices they did of farming back in the 1800s, and before that, before monoculture crops came along. So they do crop rotation is an example of permaculture. But the reason they did that, they didn't have the scientific understanding of the microbiology of the soil.
Right.
But they did know that if you plant tobacco, like, every year, you're going to deplete the soil. The tobacco is going to suck, and it's going to have diseases and insects eating it, because it's not going to have a strong immunity. So they've known that crop rotation they didn't know, but they knew that it worked in practice. And one of the things that to understand things like soil, and I'm going to go tie it back to permaculture. What about if you have let's say you have a pond and you harvest fish out of that pond? Well, the fish to eat, if you eat those fish, if you're homesteading, that would be something that a person would consider, is to have fish, have a pond that they can fish and for food. Well, what if you know that the fish eat a certain kind of larva, then to get their protein, and feed the fish with the larva. Well, you have to attract that insect that has the larva for that larva to exist. You need to have a plant that attracts that insect that then lays the larva for the eggs, or for the fish, and then you get big, fat, healthy, protein-rich fish. So if that's an example, you plant something to attract the bug that brings the larva that the fish eat. And all you got to do one time is plant a couple plants. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
That's like an example. It's basically understanding the bigger picture of and the different systems of living ecosystems, like how they all interact. And by doing just a few things, such as earthworks, is a term in permaculture that is probably the most important if you live in a place like the desert. They did an experiment in the 70s when permaculture first came out in Israel, or like the Dead Sea area. It's really depleted desert. And for about all they did is they learned how to catch the very little rainfall that they had. They shaped the earth in a 10-acre plot. They shaped the earth to catch that water, and they planted a certain kinds of trees, and they just waited. So a couple years passed. Those trees dropped their leaves and create soil from dead, like salty soil, sandy soil, and rocky, and not good for plants. And figs being something that they grow over there, that was the first thing that they tried. Once they got soil from the trees and the water, by shaping the earth, usually just by doing things like creating little catch basins, and moving earth so it's when it rains, the gravity feeds one area, right? That's earthworks. Machu Picchu is an example of that. They in Peru, where they would catch the rainfall and it would water the gardens, and it would have like these steps that went down the mountain, but it would sit there and the water would catch in each step, overflow, and then go down. So that's an idea. Is then what happened in 5 years, they had really nice soil. And this woman who was taking care of it runs to the guy in charge of it, and she's like, look. And she showed him, and she's like, there's fungus in here. Like, she thought it was a bad thing. Fungus is great for soil. That's what it breaks material down. And he was like, yes. He was basically like, yeah, we have the microbiology there now that we can plant. And they started to plant. Once they got the signs of the fungus in the soil, they started to plant it up, and it became a very productive garden. And it was like an example that you could, with permaculture practices, you can create an abundance in a place that is a desert. So that's the kind of thing that I think it's the way of the future. Personally, it's like this monoculture BS is going to be done. It's like we can't have Monsanto sitting there making our corn and putting like freaking spider DNA and whatever else they put in that stuff. And so it's people getting back into more of an agrarian lifestyle. I think that's where we're headed in the long run.
Well, isn't that kind of the only way? Because for the longest time in human history, you didn't really have these, monocultural farms and chemicals to kind of combat every single little issue that came up. It was more of a little bit of soy here, some corn there, tobacco here. And they just kind of rotate and mix, and it would kind of prevent disasters. Like, what was it? The Irish potato famine.
That's
where
right.
When they, only plant one kind of, agriculture there, one little fungus has a buffet, right?
That's right.
And it can completely deplete all of the food there. No, but it's funny because all of this happened in the last 100 or so years, 120 years.
Yep.
Where somebody discovers a chemical that can kill a bug, and all of a sudden you can grow 100 acres of corn every single year, no problem, no worries about bugs, no worries about anything. And then next thing you know, the ground is destroyed. It's requiring more and more water, more and more chemicals, and it's just making the world and us more and more unhealthy.
Yep, we're eating it. Yeah, absolutely. And that leaky gut and the glyphosates, the Roundup, and these different chemicals. It's like someone you mentioned discovered. It's interesting. You wonder if they were discovered, or they were just someone in the lab discovered something and they said, "Oh, look, it kills bugs. Well, let's spray it all over people." Right.
Right.
Well,
right.
The logic of that is it's like it makes me wonder what we sort of deserved it, whatever the effects were, because we were stupid and let them do that, or we thought that bugs were bad. Bugs are not bad. It's interesting. We're going to go to Home Depot without a mask, by the way. When I go to Home Depot, I'll go into the section without with all the chemicals, like I'm looking usually if I'm there, I'm looking for bee spray because I don't want to get, yellow jackets like kill us when we're trying to do our work.
Right.
But I'll like bug killer, like that. I think that's the name of one of the brands from Ortho. And it's just like bug killer. It kills all the bugs. It's just like, why would someone put that in their lawn? Like there are so many beneficial bugs and things. There's stuff like Japanese beetle larvae, which is their name is escaping me. They're white, but that stuff like destroys lawns, but because it's an invasive species,
Mm-hmm.
and so people will treat that. But it also with every square inch of soil, there's millions of microorganisms. If it's killing something the size of a grub, that's what it's called, grubs. If it's killing something the size of a grub, which is like about a half an inch long and white and then kind of fat and juicy, if it's killing something that big, what's it doing to the stuff that's microscopic? That's
Right.
and beneficial. Like we don't know what this stuff is doing. There's a lot of beneficial. Bugs are not bad, just like species of animals just aren't just bad by their nature. Why would you kill them? Especially when you don't even know if they're, I get it. If you don't want, you don't want your grass eaten, that's fine. There are ways to do it. I'm a big proponent of just reseeding and just wait, because every year there's something different. Sometimes it's not a bad year for grubs. Sometimes some years are worse than others. I mean, we've been having this big scare of the spotted lanternfly, which is ridiculous because I think it's a bioweapon, just like the coronavirus. Okay, that's another topic. But I do think, and I also do think that the grubs, the Japanese beetles, they when did they come here? They came here from Japan in 1940. Okay. What happened during that time? Okay. That was what we were at war with Japan like a few years later. I think these things come in at certain times. Well, guess what? The spotted lanternfly is from China. And I think that was placed here intentionally. I think it doesn't take a rocket scientist to sort of go, okay, we're under bio warfare right now. But besides that, the spotted lanternfly comes and this is like 2 years ago, freaking out about this thing. And oh no, we're going to lose our tree. Guess we haven't lost trees. The one thing it does do is hit the agricultural crops pretty bad. Which again, if you
it's targeted.
Ding, exactly. It doesn't hurt like people's favorite prized oak tree or maple tree. It's not good for them. It weakens them. But the spotted lanternfly is kind of like they're one of these things that come in and they put their little proboscis thing into the cambium layer of the tree and they suck all the juice that comes up out of it. And then they move on because the blood pressure of the tree, think of like a tree does have blood pressure. It has it's got the xylem and the phloem and the veins and arteries, and it's pumping up. So if you're at the top of the tree where it has to pump to the very tips of the branches, these things are sitting there sucking the juice out. And if all of these things are sucking the juice out, it's sort of like your blood pressure goes down and the tree's blood pressure goes down. Once that happens, they're not getting anything from the tree. They move on. And then the tree recovers. So usually it only affects older trees that are already, it's kind of like the coronavirus. It only, like if they have comorbidities or they're already compromised in some way, their health, then it can affect them. But it does get I think you're right. It's targeted because it hits, especially Pennsylvania. I think it started in the middle of the country somewhere, like in Illinois or something. And this big swarm just moved across the states towards the East Coast. And we had it pretty bad this year. Like they were everywhere, but they laid their eggs and no one knows what they're going to do later. But I didn't see any trees dying from it. But vines, things like the grapevine. Which Pennsylvania has a pretty big wine industry actually, and the grapevines and the fruit trees in Pennsylvania did get affected because they had to cover them, and it does make a difference in the size and quality of the fruit because it sucks the juices out of the tree. It's not going to it's not going to make nice fruit. So I do think it was targeted. It makes sense that it was. And, but it's, people freak out at this, that these things exist. And I think that problem is people's fear of it. Just let it run its course, and,
Right.
and then there are no natural predators yet that we know of. That was my air compressor. There are no natural predators that we're aware of. And people are talking, oh, we should introduce, this bird or this other insect that eats them. It's just like, that's just going to create more problems.
Right. I actually, it's funny that you say that, because I've always had this theory that the problem with mankind at the end of the day is how often it tries to solve a problem that may not even be a problem.
Amen.
And
I think the biggest driver of that, I agree with you, is fear. Because if you're afraid of something, you got to solve it, right? And we look at what we're doing with Corona. It's killing our economy, and it's only going to get worse if they keep pushing fear. And it's like they have the ticker on CNN saying, hey, like, look how many are dead now. Well, now that Biden's in, the ticker's gone. So it doesn't even, because they want to change the narrative. So it's really I'm suspect of all of it. And whenever they're pushing fear, telling you to be afraid of something, they did it with terrorism. They did it with, all these things. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. Question that. That's the thing I think first is I doubt they're trying to get me to be afraid of something, a bug, a virus that I can't even see, whatever it might be. And it's just fear. And then, well, we got to solve this. What do we get? Yeah, usually the solution is worse than the problem.
yeah, and it's always, it's just such a tough conversation to have, because if you tell someone who's left wing that, hey, maybe we're overreacting to the coronavirus, they'll call you ignorant. But if it's the opposite way, where whatever, the other person thinks you're ignorant, right? So there's no real dialogue out there.
Not one until right.
Right. No, and then the problem is, when something happens years later, it comes out that there was a certain agenda, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it takes years for it to come out, and but in the moment, you get blinded by whatever the loudest noise is.
Yeah.
And so it's tough. It's tough to.
It is.
I think whether you're left or right, I think that everyone can agree that the government just completely mishandled the entire thing.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think shutting down everything for 6 months was the right solution, because we should know that people aren't really going to do that.
Right.
Because if you actually did shut down, then I think if you literally said, hey, you know what, everyone stay home, we're going to send you money, we're going to send you food delivery, we're going to give you everything you need for 30 days. 30 days, everyone just stay home. This virus would have been gone.
But they did. They basically did.
Not really. It took them forever to actually acknowledge it, and then the checks never came for until like 2-3 months later, right?
Right.
I'm talking about literally, you're not gonna miss a single paycheck. You're not gonna literally go home. Whatever hours you were working last month, that's what you're gonna get. Like literally, just stay home, and you're gonna get paid. If the virus literally if you have to breathe on someone to get the virus transmitted, and nobody's breathing on anybody for 30 days, I mean, all it would take is 2 weeks, but 30 days just to be safe, you could have gotten rid of it and we've all been back to normal today.
Yeah, but if you notice, they misdiagnosed. I mean, they called, CDC has said they basically have called many things coronavirus that weren't. And they just came out with that, and they came out with the PCR test that they do, that they're doing less revolutions, which is the way they test for it. They did 60 in there, and now they're knocking it down to 40, which basically means there's going to be less positive cases. And they don't even know the PCR test isn't meant to diagnose a disease. It's meant to acknowledge that something's there. It doesn't mean you're sick from it, right? Or that you're even contagious or would pass it on. So it's not a diagnostic tool. And the inventor of the PCR test even said that. So he's like, told Fauci, it's not a diagnostic tool. It should not be used for that. And Mullis, his name is. And there's mishandling all over the place. Yes, I believe there's agendas, and maybe that might have happened, but we've been in shutdown for a long time. A lot of places are still locked down. And I'm just wondering, it's like, do we live in fear of a virus, or we just build up our, get attracted, just like Merck, the company Merck said, it's best to just get the virus and then build up antibodies against it. They were, the argument is that they didn't get the vaccine. What do you call it? They didn't win the vaccine race. So they're now smashing it.
Right.
But, who knows? The one thing, I think I had it. I think I was dead. I was dead for 2 days. Like I've never had this was back last February. So a year ago. And I was just like out, man. I could not get up. I'm like just floored. Right. And it was like no other kind of flu that I've had before. So it was really bizarre, but it was like 2 days. And then I was back up again. And like I said, I don't wear masks as much as I can if I can avoid it. And I'll go down to Wawa and I'll lick the door handles. I believe in building up one's immunity, and the exposure helps with immunity. And yes, there are people that should not should reduce the exposure. Of course, that's common sense. Like the older people or the ones that are, 300 pounds and are diabetic or something. It's like, those people should not be getting exposed to it. But there's things that it is good. It's like we were talking back to the microbiome. If our bodies build the exposure, maybe you're right about that, but maybe it's not the right course of action to not get it. Maybe the course of action is to get it. And yes, we're gonna have casualties. We always have casualties of everything. I mean, we're going to be afraid of every disease that comes down the road, and it's not logical to me at all. And we either, because it was rapidly spreading disease, but it also had a very low death rate. And, 1.5 million people died of tuberculosis last year. And we're not sitting there wearing masks for tuberculosis or even hearing about it. So I think you're right. There's agendas somewhere in there. And it's easy to be Monday morning quarterback. But we're still in the middle of the game, I guess, is one way to think of it.
Yeah.
And I don't, I know a lot of people. Our landscaping business did really good, but I know a lot of guys, carpenters specifically, that got hit really hard in the beginning, out of work for 3 months or so. And
and that's the part that really okay. So the two parts that it makes me hard to just kind of push coronavirus just to the side and be like, hey, it is what it is. Like the two things is, one, all of the lives that have been affected, right? So if you look at the hospital, I think a big part of trying to shut stuff down initially was the hospital rates, right? Hospitals were just overwhelmed. You had people just sleeping on the sides. I mean, I had one of my previous guests, she came from Guatemala. People just didn't even get beds, right? There was no space. Here in New York, we had tents outside that, we were like, hey, if we don't stop spreading it, people are going to start dying outside, right? So like stuff like that, it's like, okay, I get it. Like we need to kind of like reassess what we need to do, how we can handle this. Because you also can't treat it the same way in a city like New York City versus in a, Youngsville, Pennsylvania somewhere, right? Where a population of 200.
Right. I hear you.
So again, and the way the government handled it, I think was just terrible, 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 terrible. Will we learn from this? Probably not.
Well, the media didn't do a great job either. Are we going to learn from that? That's what I'm wondering. Are we going to again? Where is it? Where is it now? It's like they're saying the PCR tests are going to be different, and we got to same people saying 5 months ago that we have to shut down, or now saying we got to open up. And why? We're in the middle of flu season.
I completely agree. I think the media is literally after either a certain specific agenda against or pro someone, and or money, right? Because it's no longer a, hey, I'm an independent, newscaster. No, I have to sell commercials, and I have to get viewers, and I have to do all this stuff, right?
Right.
No, so I completely agree with a lot of this stuff. But again, it's hard to say, hey, I know you lost your grandparents, or I know you lost your parents, but it's a casualty that we have to pay. Well, maybe not, right? If the government does its job correctly, then that price wouldn't have to be paid.
Maybe. I mean it. Right. I hear you.
Yeah.
I'm not agreeing with you 100%, because again, it's like I mentioned 1.5 million people. Did you know that 1.5 million people died of tuberculosis last year?
No, I didn't know that.
Exactly.
Was that here in the United States or worldwide?
I think it's worldwide.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but that might be the States. That I just heard a stat the other day, and where there's things people look. It's sort of like, going back to is the cure worse than the problem itself? And I think it was mishandled. The fear was pushed, because being afraid of things doesn't help. Doesn't help many people, and it doesn't help to make proper decisions.
Yeah,
if people are afraid. People don't make good decisions when they're afraid.
Oh, absolutely, and the same thing goes vice versa, right? So if somebody tells you, hey, don't touch the fire because it'll hurt you, some people will be like, oh yeah, well, watch this, I'm going to touch the fire, right? Just to prove a point. And we had that a lot here in New York, where we had certain religious communities where, once we learned how the virus got transmitted and all this other stuff, and we started to put in mask mandates, I mean, they went out and literally did the opposite of that. And then next thing you know, hospitalization rates in those neighborhoods skyrocket. And it's like, well, there you go, right? Just because you wanted to play with fire, now your death rates are going up, hospitalization rates are going up. You don't have to, and this is where I agree with you. You don't have to shut down everything. You can still open it up, but learn, right? Okay, this is how you get infected. This is how you do this. Here's the precautions that you have to take, so that we can minimize the deaths before a vaccine or whatever comes out. Because even if even like hypothetically, China did this on purpose to attack us. If all we do is just say, we'll ignore it and let as many people die as possible, then they're winning. However, if we completely shut down and our economy crashes, then they're winning. So it's almost kind of like, okay, well, how about we just try our hardest to go down the middle? And look, I'm not a scientist. I'm an idiot. I didn't even know horticulture and all that good stuff. But I do know that science isn't perfect. And when you're a leader, like the president, a governor, a mayor, whatever, there's a lot of pressure. And I'm sure that a ton of them from the top down made a lot of bad decisions. And all I can hope is that they kind of learned from their bad decisions, and that the average person at home can tell that the media and or the government, are kind of slipping up.
Yeah.
And wherever they do slip up, catch it. Wherever they are correct, respect it, and just kind of move forward, right?
Yeah. What's it? Be cautiously optimistic, but also don't live in complete fear. I mean, I get back to that. It's like we can't. Like I said, I got it. I believe I got it. I could get an antibody. I think I can get an antibody test. I just never tried, or don't know where to go. But it sure felt like it. I don't know about whether I like my sense of smell. They talked about smell and taste. I've never had a great sense of smell or taste, so I don't even know if I lost it. But because years of chewing tobacco and smoking and stuff, I quit, but that didn't help my sense of smell or taste. But the idea is like, yeah, that's why I wasn't afraid of getting it. I'm still not. And, again, I think I have the whether it's the antibodies or I've already exposed myself. So it's because even if I test positive for it, doesn't mean I'll be sick. And that's what I mean about those PCR tests is I could test positive for it and it's present. But it doesn't mean I have the symptoms or I'm getting sick from it, because if my body already made those antibodies. So it's there. I think everybody's messing up, man. The science, the media, and government. we can agree it's a big cluster F. And if we can just sort of, learn from it would be great. At what expense? At what cost? That's what I'm curious about. How much longer do we have to go and into this?
And that kind of leads to the other part of the whole argument where I can't it hurts me, because not only are we losing, people are losing their lives, that's a big deal, right? That's someone's parents, someone's grandparents, someone I've seen, it's rare, but younger people die as well or suffer critical injuries or side effects from the coronavirus. But the other side of it is the small businesses, the employees that are dependent on these jobs that you can't work from home, right? You can't stock groceries from home. You can't do all these things from home. And they're the ones who are getting laid off. They're the ones who are suffering. They're the ones that literally got $1,200 for 6 or 7 months. Yep. It's like, come on, that's a joke. That is a joke. If somebody told me, hey, we're going to lay you off, but here's $1,200 for the next 6 months.
I know, right?
I'd go jump into East River and drown myself. There's
I'd go punch him in the nose. That's what I would do.
It's just an insult to.
It is an insult. Exactly right.
It's again top down. I think it was mishandled. We're probably not going to learn from it, but again, all you can do is look at the facts. And the way I treat anything is, I'll be careful with myself, because I don't have multiple bodies. This is the only one I have. So if I can prevent from catching it, great. But I'm also going to be preventative of giving it to other people, because if I have it and I don't know it and I give it to someone else and they die, I don't know, I'd feel like a dick. But that also doesn't mean that I'm going to live in my room for 12 months. I'm still going to go to the park. I'm still going to go to stores whenever they're available. Am I going to go to a really crowded room? Probably not. But am I going to go to whatever social event that I know close people and I trust and I respect? Yeah, I'll still do that, right? It's a balance. Mm-hmm. That's the way I try to do everything, right? Whether it's a coronavirus or anything else, there's a balance of risk and respect to others. Mm-hmm. But that's just, and the same thing with recycling, right? Whenever I try to recycle, or whenever I can recycle, I try to recycle. Mm-hmm. But every now and then I'll throw a plastic thing in the trash, right? And it's like, look, I'm not going to bend over backwards for every single piece of plastic. Is the environment important? Do I think it's, essential? Absolutely.
But the hardest part for me I hear you, and it's like, you can't, and they can only recycle certain things anyway.
Right.
You can't do every piece of plastic they're not going to do it. But the hardest part for me is watching the young people have to not play their sports, have their schools shut down. And, I'm thinking back in high school or elementary school, how important my social life was to me, and especially athletics, and not being able to do that. And the effects of that, we're not going to see that for a while, I think. I mean, the suicide rates, this is the hardest thing, man. I mean, we got depression, suicide, sexual abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction. That's on the rise. It's more people have died from suicide than they have from the coronavirus. And that's and we're talking about the rates that are the above normal. It's gone up. I think it was 8%. There's just something about I forget, about a month ago or something, I heard this, but those are those unintended consequences of the shutdown that we are just like, that must be considered,
Absolutely.
That's the shame of it to me, is that these kids that aren't, apparently they don't even like, it's like, what, one has died or something in or like only very, very few people have died. Young people have died from it. It's like the transmission rates are really low and all this. And do we shut down the country and get these kids that are already freaking out? I mean, come on, like, put a mask on them and tell them that they can't be with their friends, or that you killed grandma, that with grandma died and it was probably because you didn't have a mask, or, whatever. They might think that. And we haven't seen the end of that one. And we're probably going to see the consequences of the younger generations years from now. So, and like you said, the just like agendas are exposed, then so are the psychological traumas that come from this kind of thing. So that's the part that's really sad, is what it is.
Oh yeah, the effects of it, the effects of a shutdown and not going to school, not doing sports, losing your job, whatever it may be, those, some are initial, like crime rates are up, suicide rates are up, all of these things are up. And yeah, you're right. In the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see the effects of that down the road as well.
Yeah, and again, it's fear, the negative things, the things that are low on the totem pole of emotional states of mind, is like fear and depression and those things. It's like that. It can be argued that it caught the shutdown and the attempted cure for this, or the actions were worse than the thing itself when you look at the numbers. And even CDC even says that stuff. I mean, they're saying that it's not good to do that. To Fauci's credit, he said that too. He's like, it's not good for these kids to be not at school. So I just hope people can be smart, but also not be afraid, because there's a lot to the point of being paralyzed.
Yeah, and part of that is the whole politicalness of the whole virus, right? I think Australia, all they did was say, hey, everybody wear a mask, be safe, be smart, no political agenda, no nothing. And I think there were 2-3 days in a row with literally no new cases. And it's like, wait, how come they can do that? Why can't we do that?
Right, because they completely shut down. I think they completely shut down. No one could leave their home, kind of shut down. Their things were so strict, And again, it said, at what cost? At what cost do we stop living? That's the question. I think that do we stop living? Imagine, look at these. They're this just to give people a couple grand in their pocket, and they're talking about $6 trillion or whatever it is. It's like, you gotta be, how much longer do we have to, we can't, this is unsustainable is my point.
Right. No, I completely agree. This is why, my whole theory was, all right, there's a bug out there. Nobody knows what it is. Nobody knows what it does. Shut everything down. Everybody's getting money. Just stay home. We're going to pay you to stay home for 2-3 weeks. Everything opens up and then we're back to normal, right? Now, is that realistic in a global economy? Probably not, right? But I don't know. There's just got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and I think one of the big things that we got to do is as people, because you and I, we're not the media, we're not government. I think connection with spirit, prayer, listening to intuition. And managing one's own, I'm in charge of my fear. I'm in charge of my sadness. I'm in charge of my anger. I'm in charge of that, and take ownership of our emotional state. And we can make wise decisions, I think, after that,
Absolutely. I think managing your emotions, managing your reactions will help a lot.
Yeah.
It helps everything out.
So, Pablo, what do you do?
What do? I have a podcast called This Is Human. Mm-hmm. And I also work for a national bank. Just doing a little bit of coding here and there.
Okay. So yeah, what did you mention GameStop earlier? Did like the when we were talking earlier? That is, dude, that's fascinating, man. I'm so intrigued by that. You probably have a better take on it than I do because I'm not a very financially minded person. But did you do the jump on that GameStop train?
Not necessarily on GameStop, but we were I did milk the market for a little bit because I got a whiff of it a little bit before the media really did. And
Okay.
while the media didn't really have a grasp on it, there was, I don't want to say free money, but there was free money out there. And yeah, as soon as the media got a hold of it, the big hedge funds and all the big corporations that control, what is it, like 88% of the stock market is owned by like 10% of the people, something like that.
Yeah.
Something ridiculous. But basically, once they started to like see what was going on, they put a halt to that immediately.
They stopped it. I mean, that's illegal, isn't it?
Yes and no. I mean,
okay.
It's legal if you have the big bucks. It's illegal if you don't have the big bucks, essentially.
Right, exactly, right. But they exposed themselves though. They showed what they're really up to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that it's just kind of one of those unspoken norms. I think in the last 10, 15, 20 years, less and less people own shares of the stock market, less and less minorities, less and less everything, right? It's wealth is just becoming so concentrated at the top,
right?
That it's very unhealthy, and I think it's part of the whole situation that we're in today, right? And the coronavirus, not to go back to that, right? It's just making it worse.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Because the only way that you can really play in the market is if you have excess cash.
Right.
If you say, hey, you know what? I paid my rent, I paid food, I paid everything, and I still have left over. Let me put it in the stock market because that's where I can make the most money.
Wish I had stuff left over. It's always like it comes in and then it goes right out.
I know.
It's like we have our retirement, 403, what's it, 403B, and some IRA, and but it's like we just can't. It's like then we had $5,600 worth of car expenses that last month that we didn't expect, and so every time we think we're up, we're down, or we can't put much money into that disposable income doesn't really exist. It seems like it's just like we're spinning our tires a lot of the time, with at least for retirement stuff, and it just seems like so many people are in that boat, and that you're right that I think that is what everybody can agree on, is that besides coronavirus didn't do it, but the wealth that being concentrated. I mean, look at those guys Bezos, who just retired or bailed out of his Amazon. He's sitting there. He and what's his name? Tesla guy.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. Yeah, like they're like, their stocks went through the roof. They became like trillionaires from the coronavirus over the past year, and these people are just making amounts of money, and then it's like, I don't know. It just seems like it is getting worse and more out of balance, more into that top 1%, and people are suffering.
Yeah, and not to get too deep into it, but the only solution to that is to kind of put capitalism in check a bit. Because in the long run, capitalism is best for a handful and shitty for everyone else.
Yeah.
In the long run.
The kind of capitalism they have now.
Exactly.
Right.
So this is why regulations are important, taxes are important, all of these things to kind of say, okay, cool. Look, Jeff Bezos, we get it. You have $1 trillion, right? But guess what? You're going to have to pay a larger portion of taxes and a larger portion of things to help, pay for education, to help pay for insurance, medical stuff, right? Because you have benefited from the capitalistic society that we have set up. Now, does that mean we have to take half his wealth or something like that, or cap how much he makes? No, nothing like that. But if you don't regulate and tax and and basically keep capitalism in check, it's just going to continue until the point where even if you have a good job, you're not gonna be able to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, you have people rioting the Capitol, right?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's again, we're like like you said, same thing with like the coronavirus thing. I think in the long term, grand scheme of things, I think we're in the middle of the game of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you have a decent job, you can still make a decent living and all that good stuff. But yeah, if it continues going that way, I mean, maybe my grandchildren will end up taking over the government or something, right? Something's gonna have to change sooner or
Something's
later.
got to change. Yeah, something's got to
Sooner
change.
or later.
Yeah, this isn't working, and I just don't see it. Like, yeah, we'll see. I mean, we're in a time period with a lot of flux, a lot of change happening, and
Yeah, and I do think, a lot of people, including myself, I shit on social media all the time. But a lot of this is also driven by social media.
yeah,
So you
right.
can actually see what's behind the curtains a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have one whistleblower out there, initially
Mm-hmm.
they might sound a little crazy, but
Mm-hmm.
10, 20, 30 years from now, they'll be like, oh yeah, there was some truth to that, right? He might have not been 100% accurate, but some of the stuff that he or she was saying is true.
Right, but they just decide to shut that kind of thing down. I mean, the free speech is on the way out as well, and that's the sad part. Is like Parler getting just completely deplatformed, for instance, and it's
Yeah,
like,
and and so that's another scary thing is if you actually read the Constitution, the freedom of speech protects you from the government, right?
I know, yep,
Freedom of speech doesn't protect you from these private corporations who have an agenda who might be
yeah,
driven by the government, right? You
yeah.
don't we don't know for a fact
We
that
don't know, right?
the
No,
government.
and I'm not even saying that I'm just saying in the spirit. It's not illegal because
Yeah,
they're private companies. It's
yeah.
just in the spirit of Americanism. We
Oh
value
yeah,
speech, and
absolutely.
it's just like when you shut the conversation down, then and what it really means is like these guys are going to get. You can't sue them because it's like Section 230. You can't get. They sort of they're not. You're not allowed to sue them if they take action. They always moving the goalposts on you anyway, and it's sort of like you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't say this, you can't say that, and then or they'll be deplatformed, demonetized. Well, what all it means is the people are going to have to create their own platforms where they and which is happening. You know it's way more China than it is America to do that. That's all, and it's not
Yeah,
illegal like we discussed. I mean, it's like, but boy,
yeah,
it's frustrating to not be able to talk about something, or even one of the big things that is important that I think gets lost in this conversation about free speech is that when you for instance if people you're not allowed to say something, words, like the algorithms pick up words and then they'll just ban videos or channels on YouTube or something like that, or on Facebook, and it's like the little fact checker guy comes up and says, "Oh, it's not real," and then you're not allowed to talk, and that find out the fact checkers from CNN, so of course they're going to have their spin on it. But these people, like, the problem is when you stifle free, like, certain words, even then you can't, like, if you say to yourself, well, I can't say this, I can't say this word, you start to censor yourself. And that's the creepy part, is when you're on a platform that doesn't allow free speech, then, and you're trying not to get, you're trying to keep your video on or whatever, you're going to censor what you think, and that is the crazy part. That's really, it's 1984 stuff. It's the kind of thing where it's like, if we start to censor ourselves, we're not freely thinking, and and then ideas don't flow, and we really, that's one of the one of the best things about our country, I think, is the freedom of thought, and freedom to innovate, and freedom to make and pursue your dreams, and pursue ideas and manifest them. And when we aren't allowed to think freely, or we censor ourselves, we really limit that ability to act freely in this world. And that's the part that's sort of the side effect that is really, it's a creepy world to live in if we are not allowed to do that, to act freely.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I'm a millennial. I'm probably close to as liberal as they come, but I get in trouble with my friends all the time for saying things that they don't like. But the way I see it is, okay, if I know person A doesn't like this word, I'll try to not say it. But around everyone else, I'll still say it, right? And I try to cater certain words to certain people just out of respect. I don't want to be like those religious people in certain neighborhoods here in New York that say, "Oh, well, if you're telling me not to wear a mask and gather in groups, I'm gonna go, not wear a mask and gather in groups just to prove my point that I have the freedom to do it." Right? It's like, well, you don't want to just touch fire just to touch fire. But yeah, part of the reason I started this podcast is to A, speak my mind, but B, let other people speak their mind. I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, well, if you don't believe the coronavirus is 100% deadly and the worst thing on earth, then get off," right? No, I want to hear other perspectives. I want to hear everything else because I learn from every single person that comes on this podcast. And the last thing I want to do is tell people to not say their piece, right?
Amen, man, amen. And that's that's great. That's a really good.
And the key I think is something that you mentioned earlier, is to control your emotions and to control your reactions. Because if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, you're a spick," I'd be like, "Okay, cool, great. I don't really care." I'm not going to waste my energy in getting upset over vowels that somebody put together with their mouth, right? That's literally what it is. It's words that are coming out of someone's mouth, whether it's out of ignorance, hate, whatever it is. Good for you. I'm not going to waste my energy on that.
Right.
Now, obviously, every situation is different because whatever, but 99% of the times, I let people say their piece. I'll say my piece. And if somebody tells me, "Hey, I don't like it when you say red," okay, cool. Whenever I'm around you, I'm not going to say red. Just because I know that it stirs emotions. Now, am I perfect? Am I never going to say red around that person ever again? No.
Right.
But I will try my best to not say red.
Right. Oh, no, I'm hearing you and I agree with you. I think that's just mutual respect.
Right.
That's a kind of a lost art these days too. But I'm talking about, and I appreciate you explaining your platform, like why you're doing this is because you learn from other people, and it's like,
right.
That's huge. And that's, one of the things about social media, man, it's
an echo chamber.
That's totally a negative consequence. Absolutely. But not only is the echo chamber thing, it's the art of talking, right? Like meaning communicating one-on-one, like you and I are doing right now, right? Like we might not see eye to eye on the coronavirus, but it's like it's like find the common ground. Like bankers suck. Yeah, okay, we can agree on the big bankers or whoever, right? We can agree on certain things. I'm not saying bankers. I'm talking, the big ones, or that top 1%. They've rigging the markets forever, and there's certain things everybody can agree on, but in little comment sections, that the full conversation doesn't happen, and there's not a meeting of where we can agree to disagree. It's usually just like sling mud at someone, and that's the part of it that I'm just so it makes me nauseous to even get into those kind of conversations anymore, or even start them. I'm done with it. It's just you're at that point playing whack-a-mole with mud and just slinging it at people and trying to get one up on them. And it's one thing to have a conversation, which I've seen them. I've seen people actually have real respectful conversations that happen, but it is definitely not the norm. And
it's becoming more and more rare.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. And that's why I don't even really like going. I think I do just Facebook, and do Instagram, but I don't like the format of it. Even just getting on Facebook, I'm just getting so tired of it. I'm done. I just don't like the toxic feeling I feel when I just scroll through my news feed, and just want to say one thing, but like, no, it's going to open a can of worms and I'm going to be arguing with this person for 5 days or whatever. I'm done with it. Really don't like that part of it anymore. And being able to just that's one of the harder things. Did you notice with the Corona stuff was, wow, boy, I really miss just hanging out with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was take the stuff we took for granted, just social interactions, having people over for a barbecue, that kind of thing.
You mean a cookout? So I'm technically from the South. So when people say have a barbecue, I'm like, no, wait, you mean a cookout? Or you're gonna have people over and grill?
What is it? Where are you from? Where Joshua's, North Carolina area?
Yeah, in Charlotte. So I lived all over North Carolina: Charlotte, Raleigh, Wilmington.
Okay.
So every time I hear someone say, "Come over, have a barbecue," I'm like, "Wait, what? You're not allowed to say that."
What do you do? Like grill catfish and that kind of thing?
No, no, we don't. At least not me and my friends. Me and my friends, if we're grilling steaks, burgers, hot dogs. But barbecue is, I don't even know how to describe it. It's more of a dish, right? You don't have a barbecue. You eat barbecue.
Yeah, but you cook them on a barbecue.
A grill. Or a smoker.
Got it. Okay. Nice.
No, but Rich, I honestly want to thank you for making time to come on the podcast and have a conversation with me.
It was fun, man. I really appreciate it.
And I know that you had to push it out because you were plowing snow.
Yeah, so we just got whacked with.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, you did. You're in New York, right? Yeah, of course. It was. It did that weird nor'easter thing, and it came back around. I have a Bobcat, like a skid steer, and I don't have the contract, but right across the street from my shop where I live is a neighborhood, and there's a big landscaping company that I actually share space with, and they asked me, "Hey, you want to come over here and do some plowing?" I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" Otherwise, it'd just be sitting there on social media getting angry at the world. So I may as well make a buck,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, well, again, thank you for making the time. And, I'm glad that you made a buck plowing the snow. I hear that we're supposed to get snow again next week or something like that. So
yeah. Yep.
It's definitely winter right now.
Mm-hmm. Finally, we didn't have one for the past 2 years. So I'll take it.
It's been so warm and not snowy.
Yeah, it's climate change, man. I'm telling you, they're right about something, man.
Yeah, we got to plant those damn trees.
That's right. Plant the trees.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and you have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Bob. It was fun.